I am Evelyn Zumaya, and I am the author of Affairs Valentino. The following excerpt will be read from Chapter 12, Hoping to be Kindly Remembered. The sources for this excerpt are the George Ullman memoir, my interviews with the Ullman family, and the interview with Alma Whitaker, taken from the Los Angeles Times, December 21st, 1924 edition. Title of the article is Secrets of Valentino's Life. I begin on page 294. On December 21st, 1924, soon after his public shaving, Los Angeles Times reporter Alma Whitaker interviewed Rudy on the set of The Cobra. Stroking his pale, bare chin, Rudy lamented to Miss Whitaker how the whiskers had itched, and that he was actually relieved they were finally gone. He then expounded upon his work on The Cobra and praised his wife's editing abilities for the box office success of Monsieur Beaucaire. Quote, I made Monsieur Beaucaire without interference, and was allowed my own way in everything under my contract with famous players Lasky. But I did not cut or edit the picture myself. My wife did that. I do not think the actor can bring his best judgment to bear in cutting a picture himself. In response to a question Miss Whitaker posed about his childhood, Rudy replied he was, quote, a very troublesome boy who occasioned his mother much sorrow. He then explained to Miss Whitaker that she could, quote, never know the sorrow that he caused his poor dear mother in the days before he left Italy. This piqued the reporter's interest, and as she pressed on, Rudy was in no mood to hold back. Quote, I fell in love with a woman as old as my mama, he lamented. Alma Whitaker asked, quote, you don't mean that women fell in love with you that young, do you? No, ladies do not fall in love with me, Rudy sighed. What about all those piles of fan letters? Alma asked him. Quote, oh, they are in love with the characters I play, not me, the man. That is why I disapprove of personal appearances. I fall so short of their ideals of the characters I play when they see me in an ordinary modern suit. He then abruptly changed the subject. Isn't it dreadful to see those fine trees being cut down in the street outside the studio there, just to make a street wider, and they take 50 years to grow to such beauty? Sensing her interview had come to an end, Alma Whitaker requested an autograph and handed Rudy a pen and one of his publicity photos. He held the pen and the glossy photograph for a moment before obliging her request by scrawling across the bottom of the print, hoping to be kindly remembered, Rudolph Valentino. On Christmas Day, 1924, Natasha's gift to her husband was a solid platinum slave bracelet which he had permanently welded onto his wrist. His gift to his wife was a diamond-encrusted wristwatch. With an affectionate kiss, Mr. and Mrs. Rudolph Valentino exchanged their gifts that Christmas morning in the presence of Bea and George Ullman and their two little boys. Despite the exchange of these cherished gifts, Rudy and Natasha had been up all night fighting, and by dawn they were barely speaking. Nevertheless, early Christmas morning, Natasha telephoned George with news Rudy had a great surprise planned for the Ullman boys. Come over at once, she said. By the time the sleepy-headed Ullman boys arrived at Wedgwood Place with Mom and Dad, Uncle Rudy and Auntie Natasha had apparently made up and were all smiles. Since Uncle Rudy's surprise was not quite ready, the Ullman family stood in the foyer with Natasha, waiting for the okay to sound. While George and Bea restrained their fidgety boys, Natasha filled them in on the night's quarreling. She said that a number of things sparked the rough night. Rudy's recent purchase of 6 vicious falcons he planned to keep as pets, his long hours away from home, and her anxiety over the future of Hooded Falcon. George listened to Natasha and swallowed his fear that she or Rudy would learn of J.D. Williams' double-cross before he could negotiate a new contract for Rudy. He did not tell Natasha that at that moment he knew her Hooded Falcon was a doomed project, nor did he tell her he was already in negotiations with another production company. By the time the Cobra wrapped, he hoped to have a brand new contract ready for Rudy to sign with Joe Skank's United Artists Studios. But on that Christmas morning, Rudy and Natasha believed the future of Rudy's independent film career was still rosy, and the truth was no one doubted he reigned unchallenged as king of the movies. American women were completely under his spell, and no movie star was more dreamed upon that Christmas Eve than Rudolph Valentino. But unknown to his adoring public, he had just spent that night catching a terrible cold arguing for hours with his wife, and sniffling his way across the living room floor with an oil can and a screwdriver. He had labored until dawn constructing an expensive toy train by linking the intricate fastenings of the metal track and wiring several transformers. Natasha fumed over her husband's extreme effort, but at last the entire living room floor was covered with several tiny villages and 2 trains steaming around miniature bends, woo-wooing right on cue. And by the time the sun rose on that Christmas morning, an exhausted Uncle Rudy had blown his nose beet red as he stood like some great giant surveying his impeccable countryside on the living room floor. He gave a call to the Ullmans and Natasha that everything was finally ready. Santa Claus really came through for the Ullman boys that year. Baby Bobby was too young to remember the sight of the magnificent train, but Danny never forgot it.